What began with early experiments in Imperial Russia evolved into a powerful Soviet legacy and continues today in modern Russia. This is a journey through over a century of Russian and Soviet tank development, from the First World War designs to today's cutting-edge machines. Prepare yourself, because some of these war machines are more bizarre and terrifying than you could ever imagine. We start our list with Imperial Russia, World War I era. Vezdekhod, meaning go anywhere. This bizarre early design was one of the first attempts at an all-terrain fighting vehicle. It utilized a single wide rubber track and two small wheels for steering. Though visionary for its time, it never moved past the experimental stage. The concept was ahead of its era, but the technology simply wasn't ready. Tsar Tank, looking more like a giant tricycle than a tank. This absolute monster featured massive front wheels nearly 9 meters high. Imagine a 3-story building on wheels. It was designed to crush any obstacle in its path, rolling over trenches and barbed wire like they didn't exist. But ironically, its small rear wheel got stuck in the mud during its first test, and the beast never moved again. It sits as a monument to ambition outpacing engineering reality. The next one, Mendeleev tank, a massive landship concept that was decades ahead of its time. It featured heavy armor plating and a massive naval gun that could obliterate fortifications. The design was so incredibly heavy that it required specialized railway wheels just to be transported to the front lines. The sheer weight made it impractical, but the vision was revolutionary. Moving on to the interwar period. Ruski Renault. This was the first tank ever produced in Soviet Russia, a direct bolt-for-bolt copy of the famous French Renault FT. It proved that the young Soviet nation possessed the industrial might to manufacture its own complex armored fighting vehicles. It was a statement to the world: Russia was now a tank-building power. T-14, also known as the MS-1. This was the first mass-produced Soviet tank design. Though small and agile, it was the grandfather of the Soviet Armored Corps, serving as the primary training tool for an entire generation of early tank crews. Every Soviet tanker learned their craft in this little machine. Up next, T-12 and T-24. These were the Soviet Union's first steps into medium tank design. While the T-12 was plagued by constant mechanical failures that frustrated crews, the follow-up T-24 featured a main gun and a machine gun mounted in separate turrets, an innovation that seemed brilliant on paper. Ultimately, only a handful were ever built before the design was abandoned. T-27, a pint-sized tankette based on a British Carden Lloyd design. Intended for scouting and infantry support, it lacked a rotating turret and was famously cramped. Soldiers joked you had to be a contortionist to fit inside. Despite its obvious flaws, its simple design allowed for massive production numbers, flooding Soviet units with armored scouts. T-26. This light tank became the true backbone of Soviet armor throughout the 1930s. Based on the British Vickers design, it was versatile, reliable, and easy to maintain. It saw heavy combat in the Spanish Civil War and the Far East conflicts long before the start of World War II, proving its worth in blood and fire. BT-2, built for blistering speed. This was the first of the revolutionary fast tank series. It utilized a unique Christie suspension that allowed it to drive on tracks or shed them completely to zip along roads on its wheels alone. It could literally fly across the battlefield at speeds that terrified enemy infantry. The next one, BT-5, a lethal evolution of the high-speed tank concept. It featured an enlarged turret and a powerful 45mm gun that could punch through enemy armor. For its time, it was a dangerous predator, capable of outrunning and outgunning almost any other light tank on Earth. Enemies learned to fear its speed. T-37A. This was the world's first mass-produced amphibious tank. Equipped with a small propeller and a rudder, it could navigate lakes and rivers with surprising ease. It gave Soviet reconnaissance units a massive advantage in the marshy, waterlogged terrain of Eastern Europe, appearing where the enemy thought tanks couldn't go. Then T-28, a multi-turreted medium tank designed to punch devastating holes through enemy defensive lines. while its 3 turrets gave it impressive firepower in multiple directions simultaneously. The complex layout was an absolute nightmare for commanders to coordinate in the chaos and heat of battle. T-35, the ultimate land battleship featuring 5 independent turrets. It was a massive propaganda icon designed specifically to showcase Soviet industrial power at military parades. In actual combat, however, it was far too slow and mechanically fragile for the demands of modern fast-moving warfare. It looked terrifying, but fought poorly. T-29, an experimental attempt to marry the heavy firepower of the T-28 medium tank with a high-speed Christie suspension system. It aimed to create a universal tank that was both powerful and lightning fast. But the design proved far too complex and expensive for mass production during peacetime. BT-7, the final and most refined version of the legendary high-speed BT series. It featured sloped armor for better protection and a high-performance engine, making it an absolute favorite among tank crews. It remained a frontline threat well into the early desperate years of the Great Patriotic War. Then T-46, an ambitious project meant to replace the aging T-26 light tank fleet entirely. It attempted to combine a high-speed suspension system with a traditional light tank layout. Unfortunately, the design was deemed too expensive and overly complex for the Red Army's practical needs and limited budget. T-38, an improved amphibious scout designed to be wider and more stable in the water than its predecessor. Although its armor was paper-thin and offered minimal protection, it was an indispensable tool for crossing water obstacles and conducting silent reconnaissance missions deep behind enemy lines. SMK, a giant heavy tank featuring 2 turrets stacked at different heights like a battleship. It was built to replace the aging, impractical T-35. However, brutal testing during the Winter War with Finland proved decisively that a single turret design was far more efficient and less cumbersome in real combat. Then T-100, a twin-turreted rival to the SMK heavy tank. It was heavily armored and physically imposing, designed to intimidate. Like its competitor, it served as an expensive lesson to Soviet engineers that multi-turret designs were simply too heavy, too tall, and far too difficult to manage effectively. Now, let's look at World War II era tanks. T-40, the final amphibious light tank developed before the catastrophic German invasion. It was better protected and more seaworthy than earlier amphibious models. Most were pressed into desperate service as regular land tanks during the frantic defense of the Soviet Union in 1941 when every vehicle was needed. Then KV-1, a legendary heavy tank that was virtually invincible when it first appeared on the battlefield. Its thick steel plating could shrug off almost every anti-tank gun the Germans possessed in their arsenal. It became a terrifying symbol of Soviet defiance and resistance during the darkest early war years. Now this is the T-30, a simplified, non-amphibious version of the T-40 Scout tank. By removing the expensive and complex swimming equipment, factories could build them significantly faster during the wartime emergency. It served as a vital light support vehicle during the desperate defense of Moscow. The next one, T-34, arguably the most influential tank in military history. It combined revolutionary sloped armor with a high-velocity gun and exceptionally wide tracks for superior mobility. This perfect balance of mobility, protection, and firepower forced the enemy to completely rethink their entire approach to tank design and armored warfare. KV-2, a terrifying sight on any battlefield, defined by its massive boxy turret that looked like a small bunker. It carried a giant 152mm howitzer designed specifically to pulverize concrete bunkers and fortifications into rubble. It was a slow-moving giant that could destroy virtually any target with a single devastating blast. T-150, an experimental variant of the legendary KV-1, featuring even thicker armor plating and a supercharged engine for better mobility. It was an engineering test to see exactly how much weight the chassis could realistically handle. The lone prototype was actually sent directly to the front to fight for the besieged city of Leningrad. KV-220, a heavy tank prototype featuring an elongated hull and a massive turret armed with a powerful 85mm gun. It was intended to be a super heavy breakthrough vehicle capable of smashing through any defense. The design was eventually sidelined in favor of more practical and producible heavy tanks. Now this is the T-50, a highly advanced light tank that was truly ahead of its time by several years. It featured excellent sloped armor and a spacious three-man turret for better crew coordination. While it was arguably the best light tank of the entire war, it was simply too expensive to build in the necessary massive numbers. T-60, a small, economical scout tank born purely of desperation. It was specifically designed to use civilian truck engines and readily available parts to keep production moving while major tank factories were being frantically evacuated eastward. It played a crucial role during the absolute darkest days of 1941. Then KV-8, a heavy flamethrower tank designed specifically for psychological warfare. It was cleverly disguised to look exactly like a standard KV, one to lure unsuspecting enemy forces into close range. It was a truly horrifying weapon used to incinerate concrete bunkers and deeply entrenched infantry positions alive. T-34-57, a specialized tank hunter version of the famous T-34 platform. It was fitted with a long-barreled, high-velocity 57mm gun that fired incredibly fast projectiles. This exterminator could penetrate heavy enemy armor from distances that standard tanks simply couldn't dream of matching. KV-13, an experimental project attempting to create a universal tank by merging the heavy protection of a heavy tank with the speed and agility of a medium tank. While the project itself didn't enter mass production, the invaluable research directly paved the way for the legendary IS series of heavy tanks. T-70, the most widely used Soviet light tank of the mid-war period. It featured significantly improved armor and mechanical reliability over earlier scout vehicles. It was frequently used for reconnaissance missions and supporting infantry during the massive sweeping, flanking maneuvers of 1943 and 1944. T-43, a proposed successor to the legendary T-34 that focused primarily on significantly thicker armor protection. While it was a solid, well-engineered design, it was ultimately rejected because military planners decided that simply upgrading the existing T-34 with a larger, more powerful gun was more efficient for the urgent war effort. T-80 light tank, not to be confused with the later Cold War main battle tank. This was the final evolution of the wartime light tank concept. It featured a proper two-man turret, finally relieving the overworked commander of the exhausting duty of loading the gun manually. Production was cut short as priorities shifted. The next one is the first of the legendary Iosif Stalin heavy tanks, built specifically to succeed the aging KV line. It featured a newly designed hull and a turret armed with an 85mm gun specifically intended to knock out the newest generation of German heavy armor, like the Tiger. Is-2, a true heavyweight champion armed with a massive 122mm gun that could obliterate anything. It was designed for one brutal purpose: smashing through the thickest concrete fortifications and heaviest steel armor. It was the ultimate breakthrough weapon of the Soviets' final victorious drive to Berlin. IS-6, an experimental heavy tank that tested a cutting-edge electric transmission system never before used in tanks. It featured a sleek, highly sloped hull designed for maximum protection against enemy shells. However, the complex transmission proved frustratingly unreliable, and the ambitious project was abandoned for more conventional designs. T-44, a revolutionary medium tank that brilliantly bridged the gap between the wartime T-34 and the modern Cold War era. By mounting the engine sideways instead of lengthwise, designers created a remarkably low, compact profile that was harder to hit. It set the fundamental design blueprint for almost every Soviet tank that followed. IS-39, 3. Instantly distinguishable by its iconic pike nose armor profile. This heavy tank sent shock waves of concern through the West when it appeared at the end of the war. Its extreme armor angles provided incredible protection from enemy fire, making it look like a machine that came from the future itself. Now, let's look at early Cold War designs. Is-4, an incredibly heavy and thick-skinned beast designed purely for maximum survival on the nuclear battlefield. While almost impossible to destroy with conventional weapons, it was simply too heavy for most bridges and roads across Europe. It had a brief, difficult career before being quietly moved to the reserves. T-54, the first version of what would eventually become the most produced tank in all of human history. Armed with a powerful 100mm gun and protected by a tough hemispherical turret, it became the standard bearer for Soviet armored might during the tense early Cold War years. The next one, IS-7 Object 260, the heaviest and most powerful of all the Stalin tanks ever designed. It carried a massive 130mm naval gun and was shielded by incredible armor thickness. It was an absolute monster on the battlefield, but simply too heavy and impractical for the Soviet military logistics of the time. Now, this IS-90, an experimental amphibious light tank from the early Cold War era. It was designed to replace aging World War II scout models with dramatically improved mobility and better performance in water. Its development helped refine the critical technology used in later mass-produced amphibious tanks. PT-76, the standard Soviet amphibious tank for several decades. It was exceptionally capable in the water and saw active service in conflicts all over the globe. Its lightweight construction made it the perfect tool for naval infantry landings and lightning-fast river crossings under fire. Next, Object 416, a bizarre-looking experimental tank with an incredibly low profile that seemed impossible. To keep the vehicle as short as physically possible, the entire crew, including even the driver, was located inside the rotating turret. It was designed to be almost impossible to spot and hit on the open battlefield. T-10 originally designated the IS-8. This was the final heavy tank to ever enter Soviet service. Long, powerful, and imposing, it was designed to support faster medium tanks during breakthrough operations. Its eventual retirement marked the definitive end of the heavy tank era in favor of versatile main battle tanks. Object 140, an advanced prototype developed during the intense hunt for a revolutionary new medium tank. It featured many complex new technologies that were cutting edge for its time. Ultimately, its rival design was chosen for mass production because it was simpler, more reliable, and significantly easier to manufacture. T-55, a major upgrade to the legendary T-54, adding full NBC protection against nuclear, biological, and chemical threats. It became a global icon of armored warfare, serving in dozens of countries worldwide and gaining a well-deserved reputation for extreme reliability and ease of maintenance. Object 430. This experimental vehicle was the crucial first step toward a revolutionary new generation of armored warfare doctrine. It focused intensely on making the tank as small and compact as physically possible. Its radical development led directly to the game-changing T-64 that would revolutionize tank design. Object 277, a high-tech heavy tank project that utilized an incredibly powerful engine and a massive gun. It was intended to be the ultimate breakthrough machine for warfare in the nuclear age. However, the rising popularity and effectiveness of anti-tank guided missiles made traditional heavy tanks increasingly obsolete. Object 279, one of the most unique and bizarre tanks ever built by any nation. Featuring 4 separate tracks and a UFO-shaped hull, it was specifically designed to survive the devastating shockwave of a nuclear blast without flipping over. It could also cross swampy, muddy terrain that would completely stop any other vehicle. Then, Object 770, an advanced heavy tank prototype that focused heavily on crew comfort and handling characteristics. It featured a powerful engine and a smooth automatic transmission for easier operation. It was a very modern, forward-thinking design that unfortunately never reached production as the heavy tank era ended forever. Next on the list is late Cold War era. Object 906, an experimental amphibious light tank armed with a surprisingly long 85mm gun. It was significantly more powerful than standard scout vehicles of the era. It helped pave the technological way for future airborne fighting vehicles like the revolutionary BMD series used by Soviet paratroopers. Up next, T-62. This tank introduced the world's first smoothbore gun on a mass-produced military vehicle. It was specifically designed to fire high-velocity armor-piercing shells that could punch through the thickest armor of the time. It remained a staple of Soviet-aligned armies for many decades. Object 167, an experimental upgrade to the T-62 that tested a completely new suspension system and a much more powerful engine. While it performed exceptionally well during trials, the Soviet military leadership decided to focus resources on more radical new designs instead, like the revolutionary T-64. Object 432, T-64, a revolutionary design that changed armored warfare forever. It introduced composite armor and an automatic loader mechanism, allowing for a smaller, more efficient three-man crew. It was far more advanced than any Western tank when it first appeared, shocking NATO analysts. Up next, Object 287, an experimental missile tank built on a modernized chassis. It completely lacked a traditional gun and relied entirely on guided anti-tank missiles to engage the enemy. It proved both the potential of missiles and the serious limitations of not having a conventional cannon. Object 434, T-64A. This was the definitive version that brought the massive 125mm smoothbore gun to the front lines. It set the lethality standard for Soviet main battle tanks for the remainder of the Cold War and influenced tank design worldwide. IT-1, a dedicated missile tank that saw limited service in specialized units. It featured a pop-up launcher that fired heavy guided missiles at extremely long ranges. It was a specialized hunter designed to destroy enemy armor from complete safety before they could even return fire. Object 219, the experimental prototype used to test a powerful gas turbine engine in a tank chassis. It was incredibly fast and could start instantly even in sub-zero temperatures. This crucial research led directly to the birth of the high-performance T-80 main battle tank. T-72, designed to be the reliable, mass-produced workhorse of the entire Soviet Union. It was simpler and more cost-effective than the high-tech, expensive T-64. It became one of the most widely used and instantly recognizable tanks in the entire history of modern warfare. Object 685, a highly advanced light tank designed specifically for elite airborne troops. It was amphibious and carried a surprisingly powerful gun for its lightweight frame. Though never produced in numbers, its innovative design influenced several important future vehicles, including the BMP-3. The next one, Object 934. Another airborne light tank contender with a very low weight and impressively high top speed. It was built to be dropped from massive cargo planes to provide immediate heavy fire support for paratroopers. It was a sophisticated machine that refined the airborne tank concept. T-80MBT, a high-performance main battle tank powered by a roaring gas turbine engine, designed specifically for rapid high-speed breakthroughs. It was the elite choice for Soviet forces stationed in Eastern Europe during the final tense years of the Cold War. Object 477, a radical experimental tank often called the Boxer. It featured an unmanned turret and an incredibly powerful gun. It was intended to be a futuristic leap in design philosophy that could dominate any NATO tank on a modern battlefield. Object 490, one of the most extreme and unusual tank designs ever seriously proposed. Featuring an unusual layout with ultra-high levels of protection for the crew compartment. With its unique silhouette and advanced systems, it looked like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Up next, Object 187, an advanced prototype meant to push the proven T-72 design to its absolute limit. It featured a completely redesigned hull and a much more powerful engine. It was a highly capable tank that demonstrated just how much untapped potential the old chassis still had. Object 292. This experimental beast was a standard T-80 chassis fitted with a massive 152mm gun. It was built to test whether such a giant weapon could be effectively handled and fired by a standard tank hull to counter new emerging Western threats, finishing OFF with post-Soviet era designs. Object 299. More than just a tank, this was an ambitious project for a universal heavy platform. It was intended to be the standardized base for everything from main battle tanks to engineering vehicles and heavy armored troop carriers in a unified armored force. T-90, a successful blend of the battle-proven T-72 hull and the advanced electronic systems of the T-80. It was the primary main battle tank for the Russian army throughout the difficult 1990s and remains a highly popular and capable export tank today. Now this is the Object 640 Black Eagle, a striking prototype with a very long turret and an external ammunition compartment in the rear. It was designed to keep the crew much safer by moving explosive shells outside the main hull. It looked incredibly aggressive and modern for its time. Object 195 T-95, a monster of a tank that utilized an unmanned turret and a giant 152mm gun. It was meant to be the ultimate armored vehicle of the 21st century. Though not produced, its technological DNA lives on in the revolutionary Armata platform. T-90A, an upgraded version of the Russian main battle tank, featuring a new welded turret and a more powerful engine. It also included advanced thermal imaging sights, making it a much more dangerous and precise opponent during night combat operations and low visibility conditions. 2S-25 SBRUTSD, a unique airborne tank destroyer that can be dropped onto the battlefield by parachute. It carries the same powerful 125mm gun as a full-size main battle tank, but on a much lighter chassis, giving paratroopers the heavy firepower they desperately need behind enemy lines. Then T-14 Armata. This represents a massive leap forward in modern armor design. It features a fully unmanned turret and keeps the three-man crew in a heavily reinforced armored capsule for maximum safety. It is packed with the world's latest active defensive technology and represents the future of tank warfare. T-90M, the latest and most advanced version of the T-90 platform. It features significantly improved modular armor and a completely new turret layout with better protection. It is currently the most modern and capable tank in active frontline service with the Russian army. Now, this is the 2S-25M Sprut SDM-1, the modernized version of the airborne tank destroyer. Featuring improved fire control systems and better overall mobility, it remains one of the very few vehicles in the world that combines heavy main battle tank firepower with the agility and deployability of an airborne scout. Before you go, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. This channel brings you the most detailed military tech content you won't find anywhere else. Drop a comment and tell us which of these Russian tanks you found the most dangerous or impressive.